Hello and welcome to Psyched, the show where we explore psychedelics through social, economic, and political perspectives.
Jesse Gould, speaking on From Battlefields to Breakthroughs. Jesse Gould is a pioneer in psychedelic therapies. As founder and president of the Heroic Hearts Project, he has spearheaded the research and acceptance of ayahuasca therapy programs for military veterans. Jesse has raised over $200,000 in scholarships from donors, including Dr. Bronner's, partnered with the world's leading ayahuasca treatment centers, and is researching psychiatric applications with the University of Colorado Boulder and the University of Georgia. His mission is to help military veterans struggling with mental trauma and spread awareness of the benefits that ayahuasca therapies offer as an alternative treatment to pharmaceuticals. Jesse has spoken globally about the benefits of psychedelics on mental health and has been recognized as one of the social entrepreneurs to watch for in 2020 by Cause Artist. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Psyched.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay? Hear me, see me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining me on the Sunday. I hope it's going well. I have just a speech prepared, and then if you have any questions about myself, my own journey, or what Heroic Hearts Project does, we can have like a Q&A afterwards. So this psychedelic movement that we're all experiencing right now came into my life like a whirlwind in a way that I could have never expected. Before my own psychedelic experience, I would say I was probably fairly conservative on the topic. Definitely, as I say, a product of the DARE generation. For those of you who are not familiar, DARE was a school program that kids were pushed through in the 80s and 90s, and essentially, anti-drug propaganda. The slogan was "Just say no to drugs, all drugs." And it really pushed this conception that all drugs are bad, and you will be bad too if you ever experiment with them, try them. There was no gray area. There's no room for certain substances being used in a positive therapeutic manner. We had aggressive police officers come in and try to scare us into never even considering using one of these substances. I remember in 5th grade, our DARE officer was a big, strong policeman, Officer Dave. And he was nice enough, he was respectful. I think we all trusted him at that age as an officer of the law. The program was canceled though for our class last minute. Apparently Officer Dave had a relapse. And obviously at the time, the teachers only gave us sort of the superficial information that was appropriate for our age. But, we learned from our parents a little bit later. And it turned out this officer had a history of addiction problems due to his profession. And, on one side, what better person to tell people to inform about the harm of certain drugs. But on the other side, that story also represents the tragedy and contradictions of how we handle substances under the classification of drugs. Like many others, the DARE message stayed with me and affected how I view drugs for a large portion of my life. And so for those who don't know me, as the bio said, I'm Jesse Gould. I'm the founder of Heroic Hearts Project. I'm a veteran. I was an Army Ranger with a few combat deployments to Afghanistan. And through my own healing journey, I established Heroic Hearts Project to connect military veterans who are struggling with mental trauma to psychedelic therapies, most notably ayahuasca. As I said before, I came into this realm full of stigmas, full of my own preconceptions. I never had any issue with people pursuing drugs on their own, what people do on their own time, but I always viewed it as some form of escape. I always viewed it as more of a signal that people were just trying to avoid their issues. And psychedelics especially, struck me as something, just for somebody like Hunter S. Thompson and not the average, red-blooded American. I had all the normal stigmas that most people have when you bring up the word psychedelics. And this is still a voice that I speak from today because it wasn't too long ago. But obviously now I have, different conceptions. And this is really the story I want to talk about, because that is how this movement is going to move forward, of bringing other people who have counter viewpoints, have counter stigmas to this, and bring them on this path that it's not just all drugs are bad. Especially now it's very apparent we are in a very divided society, especially in the US. And currently we're stressed out, probably a little bit fearful with everything going on. Society has never been more, I guess, chaotic with COVID, and in the US we're having the Black Lives Matter movement, and just a lot of infighting, a lot of things going on, a lot of fearful images and voices. And people on all sides, I think, are afraid, even if they're not the best at showing it. And I think that the reason many of us are here is that psychedelic movement has, in one way or the other, brought us all to this, because we're all looking to see some sort of bigger change through these substances. Psychedelics offer the option to change the lens through which we see everything, including each other. And this is not a call for immediate peace, immediate love, or immediate change. Those things take time. But this is an opportunity, I believe, to find commonality that reaches across all demographics. We are definitely struggling for commonality in 2020, even though we desire it so much. On my own personal story, I remember one Thanksgiving, I celebrated in Florida with friends and family. My parents are separated, and so this was one of the few times that my mom, my dad, my sister were all together. I had been traveling and away, and so, I was excited for this. It was set to be a great day. However, up until this point, I'd been struggling. This was 2016. I was discharged from the military summer of 2014. And that time in between, I pretended like I was doing well. I had a great job, plans for the future. I had a pretty healthy life. I could hide it well. But like thousands of other veterans, I was just very adept at ignoring a central problem. This darkness that I could ignore, but was always present. So Thanksgiving of 2016, the night after, I woke up alone on the beach with an empty whiskey glass in my hand, covered in bug bites, covered in anxiety, covered in the shame of waking up in such a ridiculous situation. I walked home that morning, backlit by the sunset. It was about 5 miles to my house, but at that time I felt like I deserved that walk. To walk that while I was hungover and just feeling so sad and just kind of confused. There are these turning points in our life that we can look back on as a point of change, as a point of inspiration that we need to do something with our lives. I think seeing my family's face that morning was one of those turning points. Their eyes were concerned. I had an explanation, but we all left it with a heavy silence. What had happened that night was an anxiety attack, sent away by alcohol. Having all my friends and family there, bringing my guard down, and the culmination of these issues that I had been ignored for a while, just all of a sudden built up and happened that way. And this wasn't the first time I had chosen to sleep outdoors. Alcohol at the time exacerbated my issues and left me with a deep feeling of nihilism, that I didn't deserve comfort, I didn't deserve safety. This had happened in the past, but I could always brush it off when I was alone. Now there was this official ledger with my family seeing it there. And I knew these were bad habits, but as I said, it was just, I probably had too much to drink, and it won't happen again. Ayahuasca unexpectedly came into my life around this time. Ayahuasca unexpectedly saved my life. And that statement is coming from a child of the DARE generation. I found myself at a small ayahuasca center in Peru out of necessity. For quite some time, I knew there was something going on that was affecting my life. I tried everything I could think of to resolve it, which often just ended up with me ignoring it. Moments like what happened that Thanksgiving night scared me. There are so many ways that the situation can turn from an innocent, I had too much to drink moment into a mistake that follows you for the rest of your life. And I knew that these sort of occurrences were just getting worse and worse. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was putting myself in bad situations. I was ignoring the central problem. And I quickly exhausted all the options provided to me through accepted therapies, through self-help. And there was just this one option left dangling in front of me, which was ayahuasca. But it was forbidden for my mind for the past 28 years because it was a psychedelic. And I viewed that if I proceeded down this path, then I would become everything that I had in my stigmas. I didn't view myself, the story I had of myself didn't include illegal drugs. It didn't include psychedelics, nor did I believe that they could potentially help. But I was at this point where I had to try something and nothing else had worked. And so I took that leap of faith. I bring up the story because it relays a few things about mental health, how most of us have been left alone to figure our own mental health out, whether or not we're experts or not, how our stigmas can directly affect our health, and how bad things have to get before we're willing to admit anything is wrong. I imagine a similar sort of saga brings many of us here today, but we're also under unique times of division and times of fear, but also a time of opportunity for this moment. What we're seeing with all these movements is that we need commonality. Through my work with Heroic Hearts Project, I've experienced something amazing. People from widely different walks of life coming together in support of mental health, in support of nature, in support of each other. Not just, the people you view in the psychedelic community, but people from widely differing demographics that you never associate with psychedelic movement. Military veterans, cops, first responders, some people that are fairly conservative minded. Opening up the psychedelic option is not going to fix all the problems, I don't believe, we're facing in society. That will take a lot of hard work, pain, and honest communication. But psychedelics do offer a first step, a bridge between communities, a bridge for communication, and a glimpse into a world that is much bigger than the things we find so important on a daily basis. Now it's too late to ever dream of locating that DARE officer from my childhood and bringing him into this movement and saying that it's okay to struggle with addiction and that there are other ways there are good sides of these substances. But now with Heroic Hearts, we're helping the same people through psychedelics and changing the perspective. And so that's really one of our goals. Is I feel like in a lot of this, we have our foot in the psychedelic world, but also in the other part of society. And so a lot of my job is really trying to figure out, how do we connect this bridge? How do we bring in people? We have enough time and we really do it to find the differences, but how can we just agree on this and bring people from all walks of life, whatever their background or creed, to come here and understand and heal for themselves? Because veteran or not, there is a lot of trauma out there. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with our movement. So Heroic Hearts Project, just to give you a little, infomercial about it. It's a registered nonprofit in the US. We've recently expanded into the UK as well, and we're working on expanding into Canada. And our focus is obviously on veterans. But through appealing to veterans, we have been very successful spreading the message much further than that. Because especially in the US and also the UK, the veteran community is very respected and listened to. And so if we bring in true believers there, the more stories of Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Army Rangers of healing and life-saving stories through ayahuasca, through other psychedelics, the more it gets people to listen. And hopefully that proceeds to get politicians and people who make decisions to listen. And that's sort of the end goal. So for anybody that's interested, or a veteran in need, we have an application process. We provide a full program of support, including preparation before, integration support, integration coaching afterwards. We work with reputable retreats that we verify and vet and make sure that our ethos are aligned. We provide financial scholarships. We're really just trying to push the conversation forward and trying to, for those veterans that are looking to go through this, try to set them up with as much success as possible. We're also currently aligned with 2 universities, so to further the science. With the University of Georgia, we're doing a personality change survey through the use of ayahuasca. And through the University of Colorado in Boulder, we're doing one of the first of its kind gut microbiome studies to see the ingestion of ayahuasca, how that changes the gut microbiome, and then how that relates to changes in behavior and changes in hormones and all that. And we're, post-COVID, we're going to expand all that to do other biological samples. The other thing is, we've started an ambassador program. So for people who are veterans or not necessarily veterans, but want to help the cause, we are trying to provide a platform for you to do that, to really spread this message on a local area and reestablish these communities of commonality, to get back to this mutual self-supporting thing, get away from, the bickering and the divisiveness. So, I mean, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And if you don't have any questions right now, feel free to reach out. I'll put the link to our website in the chat. But as I said, we are a nonprofit, and whatever support anybody can have, even if it's just a show of support through a simple message, it means a lot to us.
Thanks so much, Jesse. Really appreciate it. We heard from Heroic Heart UK, so it was a really great talk, and happy to have you on as well. I'd love to hear a little bit more on the role that government plays in interfacing with psychedelics. Let's see.
Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me, Jesse?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, of course. So the government role, unfortunately, what we're seeing, I think it's probably been brought up a lot that, mental health treatment across the board is not where it needs to be. And unfortunately, the Department of Veteran Affairs tends to be exceptionally slow in regard to that. And so I think they're really going to be the last adopters. Fortunately, with organizations like MAPS, once it gets passed through the FDA, then that allows an organization like the VA to adopt it. And so hopefully it does get streamlined. I know they're trying with ketamine, but again, it's a slow process. And at the end of the day, their hands are tied because of the sort of catch-22 that is the drug policy. Since the VA is a federal organization, as much as individuals within the organization would want to incorporate this, they can't do it until the drugs are reclassified. And so it kind of just gets stuck in this sort of cage where nothing really changes. And so that's why one of our missions through Heroic Hearts Project is really sort of do the Hearts and Minds campaign in terms of appealing to the people, appealing to these local communities, and doing it as responsible as possible. Because if we show more of these veteran stories to, decision makers, then I think it will put more pressure on some sort of policy change down the line.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions that I've asked other veterans who have come and spoken at Psyched is, do you think that psychedelics for most veterans will have an effect where they won't want to go back into combat, that they won't want to continue contributing to war? Or do you think that some people will find that war is a necessity, combat is a necessity for security in the way that government does?
Yeah, I bring this up with a lot of the people, especially ambassadors, to help them understand the military mindset. And there are cases of people, regretting their service, or especially seeing that during psychedelics. But there's a lot of cases that, they're still proud of what they did and they would go back if they had to. It tends to really cater to a certain mind frame of some people just view, at least for now, that war is inevitable, or we just haven't figured out a way to get past that. And so as long as that's the case, there does need in a society to be this warrior figure, this person who will, risk a lot for the sake of the common, the rest of the people. And that's always been the case throughout history. And so there's a lot of people that do view that as a necessity, and they're very proud of their job. Unfortunately, you do get in these situations where politicians take advantage of that that virtue, if you want to call it that, or that integrity that people are going into this as. And, you know, politicians, we hope that they get us only into conflicts that are necessary, sort of that, you know, World War II kind of scenario. But obviously we've kind of been sidetracked on a lot of other sort of things, which I think is tragic because it does take that trust between the veterans and the politician side, and it really breaks it and fractures that. And I think that trust is necessary. I think you do need both sides. So, you know, I guess a long answer to your question, I've seen it both sides, but there are a lot of veterans that go through this, and, you know, it helps them get over their trauma, but they have, you know, no issue for the most part with their service.
Do you see a future where there are a significant portion of individuals who maybe don't want to continue contributing to the military and to the armed forces, and the government starts to see psychedelic assisted therapy as a problem because of that? Or you don't think that that's necessarily something that could happen?
No, I don't think it would happen that way. I think as long as there is a call for it, there's always going to be personalities that are attracted to that line of work or that lifestyle. I don't think there will be a shortage of soldiers. I do think it is somewhat of an archetype. I do think, you know, kind of in the Joseph Campbell sort of style of things, that there's certain archetypes that we all fall in as humans. And so not everybody's going to be the warrior, but there is always going to be that sort of demographic. And one of the things we try to do through our program towards the end is repurpose that warrior mindset. Because a lot of vets, when they come out, part of the trauma is that they feel like they have less of a purpose because now they're in like a corporate job or they're in something else, but they still have this energy. They still have this need to give back. And if you look at the veteran landscape, there's a tremendous amount of nonprofits, which really signifies that desire. And so by inspiring veterans post-war to use that energy to help others, you can really get them using that warrior mentality. In terms of the whole war dynamic, you know, I think it has to come from up top. I think it has to come from the countryside, the politician side, to have those, you know, diplomacy before wars.
Mm-hmm. And there's a conversation that's constantly happening within the ecosystem that is whether an individual who is providing therapeutic care via psychedelics has to have experience of their own with psychedelics. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, you know, folks who are specifically treating veterans, whether, you know, you have, you know, an opinion either way of if an individual has also been a veteran, whether they're more effective in actually providing therapeutic care, psychedelic or not.
I don't think it's a requirement. There is a lot of veterans that, you know, trust their therapist, but it can be a barrier to entry. And so I think professionals, especially on the therapy side, do need to understand that. And the more they work with veterans, whether or not they are a veteran themselves, the more they understand that. The veteran community tends to be very, they trust other veterans, but it can be hard for them to trust outsiders. And it's like any profession, there's a language, there's a way to it that if you're not a veteran, you might not understand the perspective, or you might not get through to it. And so it can be helpful. And so like with programs like mine, showing other veterans testimonials and having our integration coach is a veteran himself. And a lot of the other people that are with the organization have worked with veterans or are veterans themselves as well. And so that brings that layer of trust of like, okay, these guys are speaking to me on my level. They've been through the same sort of thing. And that really helps. And so it tends to be more of an understanding of that as opposed to just jumping in of like, oh, I can talk to anybody. There does need to be that understanding with the veteran community that it might be a little bit harder for you to make those breakthroughs. But I've seen a lot of great workers, therapists that get through that and have really dedicated their lives and become, you know, like de facto, I guess, veterans.
Mm. Heroic Hearts Project is currently, grounded in geographic regions. I was wondering if you see a future where possibly folks who are deployed to a country maybe that they're not familiar with, if the folks who are coming with them are, instead of just having a medic, for instance, you have a psychedelic assisted therapy practitioner. Is that something that you see in the future of possibly the Heroic Hearts Project being able to provide that, or just in general, kind of the intersection of psychedelic assisted therapy and combat?
It'd be tricky on the deployment side, just because part of the psychedelic healing path is that you really have to kind of dedicate your mind and time to that. I think it'd be very tricky to kind of go from one world to the other. The whole point of a lot of this is almost like opening up the door to post military life. So you can have, these resets. We have worked with active duty people, but again, they kind of have to be on that, like, hey, I need some sort of change or fix in my mind. I think it's, who knows what it evolves to, but I think it's best if you kind of leave these as transitional phases. What I see with a lot of veterans in general is that you spend all this time having these ceremonies and having these indoctrinations to make you a soldier, to make you think like a soldier, make you work as a unit. Basic training, if you go into special operations, each one has their own indoctrination or selection process. But then when you're getting out, there's no like program or ceremony that really transitions you back into being a civilian. And so you see a lot of these veterans that are kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I think that is another value of the psychedelic experiences. It can help, change the chapter to the next phase of the life.
Mm-hmm, definitely. One thing that really surprised me when I heard about it a year ago, I was at a MAPS fundraiser a little bit, in the spring of 2019. And I heard that there was basically a project going on underground between Israel and Palestine, where there was, conflict resolution happening with MDMA-assisted therapy. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to whether there's been conversations about conflict resolution happening with armed forces from different governments, regimes, in contexts and in pairing with psychedelics. If there's been any conversation about that and any thoughts you might have about that modality.
On the government side, most likely not, especially with the psychedelics. I know some of them might be warming up to the MDMA. That's sort of the easier access point. And Israel has always kind of been on the leading edge of that sort of thing. So, I'm not surprised when that happens. But in terms of, governments talking about ayahuasca or even psilocybin for that matter, I think that's still far off. Within our own organization, though, we've always had those talks and considerations of, concepts like that would be amazing to put together. Obviously, we want to be respectful of all sides. The last thing, you want to do is have somebody go through this experience and not feel comfortable with who they're around. And so you have to be very conscious of that. But there are people who are ready to heal and move on and embrace other soldiers, no matter what nation they're from. And so we do in the future definitely want to organize those sort of things. We have organized some international veteran retreats in the past, which have been extremely successful. So we've had some special ops guys from Australia, Canada, the UK, and it just was a very beautiful thing because, there's similar enough cultures, but there are enough distinguishing aspects to it. But bringing them all together there under this healing parameter and this bonding kind of stuff just made what they felt more universal. A problem with veterans, and I think just people with trauma in general, is you only know your trauma and you think it might be unique, and that others won't understand it or don't experience the same sort of thing. And so when you bring people together and they can see other people's traumas, that in itself can be pretty healing.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for your perspectives, insights, answering these questions. We really appreciate it. Really great work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.